I'm Councilmember Jose Huizar. We are expecting our two other colleagues later today, and happy that this is my first meeting chairing the Public Works Committee. But I was going over to our Public Works room. We call it Public Works room for a reason. We don't have our committee meetings there, but anyway, here we are. Why don't we do this? We have several items we'll put on consent, so if anyone's waiting on these items, we can have those dealt with first. So we'll have items one, 2, 3 with amendments. Have those amendments been passed out?
We have to read that into the record. You might want to read that.
Okay, so we'll do 1, 2, 4, 7, and 7 will send to Budget and Finance on consent. 1, 2, 4, and 7 on consent, and number 7 will send to Budget and Finance. Could also note in file number 8, we dealt with that matter in budget. And we'll go back to item number 3. Item number 3, do we have some amendments that we need to read into the record?
Yes, we do.
Yes. Should we read those?
Item number 3, City Engineer Report, Initial and Final Environmental Impact Reports, and Statement of Overriding Considerations relative to the vacation of the T-shaped alley westerly of Central Avenue between 45th Street and 46th Street in connection with the construction of the Central Region Elementary School number 21, vacation E1401142.
Julia Moy, Bureau of Engineering, council member on this item. This is an LAUSD vacation for Central Region Elementary School number 1. Both CD9 and BOE agree with the amendments that LAUSD has requested. They have requested a technical correction, changing Central Region Elementary School number 4 in condition number 9 to Central Region Elementary School number 21. And 3 amendments, which are amend the city engineer's report dated June 10, 2009 to delete conditions 4A and 4B. Also amend the report to delete the language contained in condition 4C and replace with dedicate sufficient area as necessary to provide for a hammerhead turnaround at the easterly terminus of the unvacated portion of the east-west alley to be vacated. Finally, an amendment to delete the language contained in condition 5E and replace with construct a hammerhead turnaround at the easterly terminus of the unvacated portion of the east-west alley to be vacated. That's all.
Okay. Thank you very much. And we have now been joined by Mr. Smith, and so with his concurrence, we have number 1, 2, 4, and 7 on consent. We have just heard item number 3 with amendments. Could also put that on consent. And number 8 is note and file that has been dealt with in budget. So we could do those items, Mr. Smith, with your concurrence?
I do.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. And we have a representative here from LASD that I worked closely with when I was there for 4 years. And you're still doing this, huh? Yes. Still building schools and vacating streets. And thank you. There's one item here that I worked on when I was on the board, and that was the Wilson Elementary School, now called the Cesar Chavez School, and a great addition. So thank you. Thank you for your work. Item number 5, we have some speaker cards, but if we could first read that into the record, please.
Item number 5, continued from January 7, 2009 and May 20, 2009. Motion, Lavange Huizar, relative to the creation of a task force to examine ways to regulate the sale of cars on city streets and related matters.
Is there a presentation on this
Yes.
matter? Okay.
Keith Pritzker, Deputy City Attorney. I was going to give a quick staff report. When this item was last before this committee, I opined that I thought it might well be possible to do something similar to the ordinance in Lawndale that limited to some degree the ability to put for sale signs in automobiles. As you no doubt are aware, the city was sued in 1999 for a similar ordinance. We lost that lawsuit in federal court in 2000. I've spoken at length with the attorney who handled that case and is still with our office, and we've discussed ways in which we could be more limited in how we define areas that prohibit for sale signs and automobiles. And what we need to do at this point is to convene the task force that was called for in this motion, which I do not believe has yet met. That is the motion called for Building and Safety, Street Services, LAPD, and my office to form a task force to talk about how this might be done. I would like to request that this motion go ahead and instruct me as well as the other city departments, and to add to that list the Department of Transportation to report back in perhaps 45 days, and we could then give you an update on how we think we could come up with a factual underpinning that hopefully would withstand any legal challenge that might be brought against a more limited ordinance that would prohibit that type of commercial speech.
So you're requesting 45 days to come back to this committee, to have the task force be set, meet, and come back with a report?
Yes, and I'll take responsibility for sending out notices to all of those members of the task force, and I'll come up with a date, time, and location for meeting, and we'll try to come up with, well, we will come up with some guidelines that we think, as I mentioned, would withstand a judicial challenge. And I do want to point out that if you look at the Lawndale ordinance, which is part of the city file, that ordinance identifies particular commercial streets in the city of Lawndale. So if we're going to do something similar, we're going to need some factual underpinning to identify those streets or those commercial districts where we believe that there's a nuisance or a hazard, and we have to have some factual underpinning for our claims if we hope to withstand any challenge on First Amendment grounds.
So we're going to model our ordinance on the city of Lawndale?
Well, I don't know if I'd say we would model it after that, but certainly taking into consideration the critique of the judge who heard this matter in the year 2000 on our previous ordinance, we're going to look at something similar and see if we can come up with some guidelines that will have a factual basis that will justify the exercise of our police power, and that a court, we would hope, if called upon, would find as reasonable for the restraint of commercial speech within certain limited areas of the city with regard to these for sale signs and automobiles. I just want to add, as a practical matter, we all know that there are certain parts of the city where there is a lot of use of the public streets. Parking is very limited, and people will sometimes put cars for sale with signs in those areas because they know that there's a lot of traffic in those areas, and that creates a hazard, or it creates certainly an inconvenience for others who would like to use the streets. So that's what we're going to be talking about, and then we'll report back and let you know what our findings are.
Okay, sounds good. Mr. Smith, any questions or comments?
Yeah, we went through a similar situation a couple years back when we had the unattached trailer issue. And the city attorney on that case was Shelley Smith, who determined that the state law was so constraining that we couldn't do a general ordinance for the city of L.A. because it was too big. So you look at the city of Lawndale, which is an extremely small city, they can do things that we can't do because of our size. And so we were looking at posting, just along the entryways to the city of L.A., you can't have unattached trailers. So, you can't do that. We had to go to defining districts by DOT process and then posting every 50 feet or whatever it is, a sign saying you cannot do that. And that was the only way we could do that, the unattached trailer ordinance. So you might have to look at that or talk to Shelley about that, because she's already kind of gone through some of this iteration already.
Yes, I'm well aware of those issues and those limitations, especially as they've created a nuisance in the San Fernando Valley. I know that the previous chair of our Transportation Committee was very keen on that, and I know that Councilman Zine was very concerned about it in his district. I know that's been a problem in your district as well. You know, I've looked at those restrictions, and we will look at that as a potential option here.
And it has been tested, because we just won a lawsuit against that on that very case. So it's been tested in court already.
Great.
We have two public speakers on this item, Michael Woodman, and after Mr. Woodman is Ricardo Gomez. Yes, if you could sit up here, please, and you have 2 minutes to speak.
My name is Michael Whitman. I'm Vice President of the Los Feliz Improvement Association, representing 1,000 households in the Los Feliz area. I want to thank the committee for continuing to pursue a resolution to this problem. However, we now have waited almost a year since Councilman Labange and Wazir introduced their motion in October 2008. And we have waited almost 9 months for a report from the City Attorney's Office that was directed to be delivered within 30 days of January 7th, 2009. Approximately 150,000 children have been born in the Los Angeles area while we continue to wait for the City Attorney to give birth to its own report. We are not talking about private individuals making isolated sales of their vehicles near their residence. We are talking about sometimes as many as 30 cars suddenly appearing in the middle of the night on short stretches of Los Feliz Boulevard and other streets throughout the city. These cars are not owned by local residents. They constitute coordinated, unlicensed commercial ventures in many instances, are in violation of applicable registration requirements, monopolize valuable parking spaces, discourage visitation to local businesses, cause traffic and safety problems, and are unsightly. The constitutional analysis required by the City's Attorney's Office is not new, novel, or particularly complicated. I'm an attorney. It is well developed in case law. The Supreme Court has established a four-pronged test that we believe can be met under these circumstances through a well-crafted legislation if only the City Attorney's Office will commit to do so. In fact, the judge in the 2001 Burkow case, which the City Attorney referred to, striking down the previous L.A. ordinance, provided an invitation to that office to revise a statute along those grounds. There are literally hundreds of jurisdictions around this country that have dealt with this issue successfully. While the City of Lawndale may be a starting point, it is not necessarily the statute that works best for the City of Los Angeles. And we are anxious to work with the City Council, the City Attorney's Office, to bring forth a resolution fitting the city's requirements, if only they would return a phone call in 9 months. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Ricardo Gomez.
Yeah, I'm here. I'm second vice president of Los Feliz Improvement Association, and I live in the Franklin Hills area, just north of Fountain. This has been a severe problem for years, and I think the city attorney understates the problem. It's not just signs on cars. I mean, there are enough cars sometimes in a block area to open up these car lots. And these are commercial businesses. The city is missing out on the business tax. The property tax would be from the car lot. Not to mention all the other problems that arise from this. I mean, I don't want to. I'm tired of testifying before this committee, and I'm hoping, Mr. Huizar, that you can push this matter forward. It seems to be put on the back burner. It's an important issue. Supervisor Molina is dealing with it in her district. She's putting together some legislation. It seems that L.A. is the one city that is just full of excuses on this. I'm also an attorney. I've looked at the constitutional issues. They're not that complicated. This factual package could have been put together quite some time ago. It's not terribly difficult. We could go out and talk to residents who in the past have worked with building and safety to arrange stings and videotaped it. There's people there that they can talk to. And I just want to say it's come to losing faith in the city. I've done a lot of community work, community activism. And yet when we come up with something where everyone agrees in, which is kind of a rarity among the communities in Los Angeles sometimes, it doesn't go anywhere. And it's simple, and as Michael said, there's all kinds of cities around the country have passed constitutional muster on this. without a problem. I think there's the city attorneys, well, we have a new city attorney, I recognize that. We have a new city sheriff in town, and maybe he won't be so gun-shy about putting something forward and not be so sued. So thank you. I just hope that you can move this along so we don't have to come here every 6 months and take up time when nothing's done, really. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you for your comments. The next speaker is Mary Rodriguez from Council District 4.
Hi, Councilman LaBonge was hoping to be here, but he got called on an urgent matter with the captain of the Wilshire Division, but maybe he'll walk in. I'm hoping, as you know, he introduced this motion some time ago, and he's been really, we receive calls from the community all the time asking, is this moving forward? What's happening on this case? And we really are anxious to work with the city attorney's office and all of the task force to put something together to try to make it move forward. It just seems like it's been stuck. So whatever you can do to help us move it forward, we would greatly appreciate it.
Well, thank you. And one of the reasons I agendized this as one of the first meetings that I chair was to make sure that we move this forward as expeditiously as possible. I am in agreement with the previous speakers and with Council District 4. So we will work with the city attorney and all other relevant parties to come back in 45 days and to, again, summarize when we get back here in 45 days, what is it that we will be hearing at that time?
I'd be glad to do that, and I'd like to invite all of the speakers today, especially the homeowners who are both attorneys, to feel free to contact me directly. I have not had any discussions with them previously. I didn't know about their involvement, but please give me a call. My number is 213-978-8141, and I'd be glad to give you my my email address as well, so that we could be in touch as this process moves forward.
I just have a question.
I respond.
Sir,
Excuse me.
Excuse me, sir. This is not a back and forth. Yes.
I respond to all
If you're a
calls.
lawyer, then carry the decorum that you would expect in a public setting. That was not appropriate, and you know it.
And for the record, we've been joined by Councilmember Richard Alarcon. So in 45 days, what is it that we will hear back from the task force in this committee?
Well, our goal would be to present to this committee an outline of what an ordinance would look like and that we would believe would withstand a judicial challenge, providing some way of restricting the degree to which cars listed for sale can be put on city streets.
Okay. And that's in 45 days. Okay. Thank you. Any other questions or comments?
Actually, this is, I always wonder how can somebody sell a car on the street, but this paragraph from Mr. Robinson is a little confusing to me, where it says that the federal court issued a citation in '99 for placing a for sale. Okay, we issued a citation to this guy for placing a sign on his car window, and then this description says the United States District Judge Howard Matz ruled that signs in car windows were not a matter of public safety. Why was that the basis of the case, or what? I don't understand.
Well, I think it might have been just before. Yeah, I think just before you joined us, I was explaining that I had spoken at length with the attorney that handled the case back in the year 2000, who's still with our office, and she indicated, as well as the case itself, that indicates that there was no factual underpinning to justify the restriction on the ban of for sale signs in automobiles. In other words, we might need reports about it being.
What was the basis of the citation? It was relative to safety?
Well,
what does that have to do with just getting a car off the street that has a for sale sign on it?
Well, the citation was for a violation of municipal code as listed 80.75. Now, that section just said, you cannot put a for sale sign in a car on a city street. It didn't have any underlying factual information that justified the adoption of the ordinance as a public safety issue or some other factual
The
basis.
city attorney must have argued that it was a public safety issue?
Yes, I think it was argued as
Well,
a...
maybe that was the wrong argument.
Well, we try to make the best arguments we can, certainly, to justify the...
That's not the point.
Right.
The point is, we need to understand if that was the wrong argument.
Okay.
In other words, the judge isn't saying you can't eliminate a car with a sign. He's just saying that it wasn't a matter of public safety, which apparently was the argument that was used in court.
Yes.
But maybe he was also saying there are other arguments you can use.
There absolutely are other arguments that we could use.
That's what I want to know. What are those arguments?
Well, that's what we will discuss at the task force, and we'll come back with a full listing. I think clearly the availability of parking in certain congested neighborhoods is another issue in addition to public safety that can and should be addressed.
Well, it's a transportation management issue as well.
Yes.
They concentrate in certain streets, like on Roscoe Boulevard, which they do. It could get in the way and inhibit. And we probably have records that demonstrate tow trucks having to take them out of the way because they're impeding traffic and all kinds of other things. But this was clearly waged on the premise of public safety, which maybe not have been the best argument. The second thing is sort of a secondary thing to look at is what the feasibility of requiring permits for signs on cars that want to sell, on public streets.
Well, we could bring that up in the task
It's
force.
something to look at as a side. If we can't go at it this way, then maybe there's another way to look at it. Anyway.
Okay. We'll look at it as a licensing question as well.
But I agree with Mr. Weezer, and I just think we need to get a handle of this issue. I appreciate Mr. LeBlanc bringing it up, and I just don't think this is something we can't figure out.
Yeah, I think so, and I don't think 45 days is decent. I think it should be 30 days.
Okay.
That means it's real simple. People are disappointed that it's taken so long to get to this point here. And it's nice to hear, because it's an impact, what people are doing all the time now, are they're putting it right on the street. Richard, when you said on Roscoe, I flashed, someone walks around a vehicle.
You flashed on Roscoe? Is that what you said?
I flashed on the concept. There's a car right there, and when someone walks around the car, they may not see an impeding car coming down the street. It's a safety factor. The street is not a place to conduct commerce. The street is a place to move traffic or cross the street safely and have respect for the California Vehicle Code. The city of Lawndale has this. Have you checked that out?
Yes.
What's wrong with not applying Lawndale's effort to ours?
Well, in Lawndale, they identified particular commercial streets where they were going to prohibit for sale signs in automobiles. So if we're going to do something similar to that, then we have to work collectively with a compilation of which city streets we're going to do that on.
Let me ask the question.
Yes.
What if every major highway in the city was that way? What if we said every major highway? So not a secondary, but a major highway.
Well, I think that's something that certainly the task force can and should look at.
Who's on the task force?
Well, according to the motion that you introduced,
Right.
It's building and safety, street services, LAPD, my office, and I asked that we also add to that Department of Transportation.
Okay.
So that would be our task force.
And should we ask that the Department of Motor Vehicles from the state of California come if it's not a furlough day for them?
I have good news for you, Councilman LaBranche. I believe that a court just ruled that those state furloughs are illegal, so we may see the DMV operating every day of the week now.
All right. Mr. Chair, members, thank you very much. You see the problem. You may have heard from the frustration. I apologize for being detained. So I think we go forward in 30 days. Today's the 2nd of September. So if I could have it back on the committee agenda, the first meeting in In
30 days
October?
sufficient?
Okay.
You're on the committee.
Is 30 days sufficient?
Well, we'll do everything we can to try to wrap it up in 30 days.
Okay.
And we'll report back with our results. But we understand the tremendous imposition that has been placed upon the residents throughout the city, but especially in your council district.
All districts.
Right.
All districts.
Well, thank you very much,
Okay.
Mr. Labange, and thank you for bringing this to our attention.
Thank you very much.
We've expressed our urgency to have this back as quickly as possible. So in 30 days, we'll have this item before us. So without objection, we will continue this item for 30 days and have the task force report back to us in those 30 days.
Yes.
Okay? Thank you very much. Next item.
Item number 6, motion Perry Parks relative to naming the intersection at Central Avenue and 6th Street, Officer Charles P. Williams Square.
Is there anyone here to report on this item? Anybody from Council District in CD9?
Good afternoon, Stephanie
Good afternoon.
Magnan from Councilwoman Perry's office. We were actually contacted by the captain, the patrol captain from Central Division, who alerted us to the contributions that this officer had made to the city and the sacrifice that he had made. Councilwoman thought it was very appropriate to name this intersection in his honor, and she hopes that you will forward this on to council for approval.
Thanks. So this is in recognition of Police Officer Charles P. Williams, who was the first African-American to be killed in the line of duty. Is that accurate?
That's correct, and he was actually mistakenly reported as a Caucasian officer until, I believe it was 75 years after his death. As a Caucasian officer, he was mistaken as a Caucasian officer because of his last name. And
Last name was what?
Williams. I don't know the details into the misrecording, but it was about 75 years later until the correction was made, and actually a proper burial was given to this officer. So because of his service and because of the errors that the city was made, I think it's appropriate that this recognition be given to the officer.
Great. Thank you. Any questions or comments on this item? So we'll approve this item without objection, send it to full council, I believe. Is that accurate? This would next go to full council, is that?
Yes.
Yes, okay. Thank you very much. Next item?
Item number 9, Board of Public Works report relative to a proposed ordinance amendment to sections 46.00 and 62.162 of the Los Angeles Municipal Code to add monetary administrative penalties to improve the enforcement of ordinances protecting the urban forest.
Thank you. Welcome.
Good afternoon. Gary Harris, Bureau of Street Services. What we have before us today is a report that proposes to change the Los Angeles Municipal Code to add monetary penalties for damaging street trees. Currently, the Bureau of Street Services has two groups of employees that work cooperatively on protecting the urban forest. Those are employees in the Urban Forestry Division who maintain the urban forest, and the employees of the Investigation and Enforcement Division who enforce various ordinances and laws related to city property. What this proposal will do is grant the authority to the personnel in the Urban Forestry Division to issue administrative citations. These citations would be not criminal. They would add a penalty of up to $1,000 for damaging a street tree on city property. It would not significantly change the activities of the employees involved. The urban forestry staff currently responds to complaints about damages to trees. They issue notices, but the notices they issue at this time have no bite, no teeth for enforcement. They're merely warning notices, and they ask people to replace the trees that are removed from city property. In addition to doing that, though, this ordinance change would allow the city to recover some of the revenue lost in enforcing these particular laws. We also think it would be a very serious deterrent to people trimming our trees illegally or damaging our city trees. This would primarily be in commercial areas where we have the largest impact from businesses that basically kill city trees in the parkways by trimming them in order to get better window space coverage from passing cars or pedestrians on the street. There will be a side benefit to this program, as it will generate some revenue to recover the program costs. Be happy to answer any questions you might have at this time.
Yeah, so this would primarily, I mean, the problem, if we could state the problem, why we need to make this change is there is no real penalty for people who do this, so they're just going to get a notice and they may do it again because there's no, they're not going to feel any pain, so to speak. But most of the people who do this are in commercial quarters, as you said, and businesses who want to trim the trees to have their business signs more properly viewed, et cetera. Is that?
That's correct. It's important to point out that this ordinance does not take away discretion from either the enforcement personnel or the urban forestry personnel, that we know we're dealing with a homeowner who may not be aware of city permitting requirements, that they don't have to be subjected to a $1,000 penalty versus a commercial operation that's intentionally damaging the trees. We have areas of the city where this is done on quite a regular basis to people who have received notices telling them that they should not be damaging the city tree. Yeah. So it is primarily a commercial issue that we're dealing with.
And sometimes I've experienced a situation where some of the business owners do this out of frustration because we go back and tell them, well, we don't have the proper resources right now to go back and trim those trees so that your business could be more properly viewed. And, you know, we only have sufficient resources to send out in cases of emergencies or when there is a safety issue such as touching power lines, et cetera. I mean, if a business owner calls and says, I need my trees trimmed because there's a lot of outgrowth and people can't see my business, how long does it take for a city crew to go out there? If they can't do it, they're going to get penalized for doing it. How long would it take?
George Gonzalez, Bureau of Street Services. We don't make we don't have a difference. Our trim cycle is the same for a residential area as it is for a business area. What we try to do with the business areas is let them know that there is a permitting process, that you could get a permit, no fee permit, to trim the tree, and we encourage the business owners to trim the trees so the tree will grow above the signage. We've done it successfully in some business districts. Larchmont is one of the areas that we've had a lot of success in. And when they do that, it's sort of counterintuitive. The folks that have their signs blocked by street trees, typically what they want to do is they want to make the tree as small as possible. So when they cut it below the signage, what happens is it's always going to grow back up into the signage. What we encourage them to do is let it grow above the signage. That obviously takes some time, but once that's done, then the canopy of the tree will always be above the signage, and they won't have that problem.
But they could get a permit and have a professional trim the tree.
That's correct.
It'll cost them some money, but they can't get the permit.
It'll cost them money to do the work. The permit doesn't cost any money.
Okay, so their two options are wait until your cycle is up for the city to come around and trim your tree, or get a permit, get a professional to trim it, and they pay for it, right?
That's correct. Okay. And I just want to add that probably our number one violator is not business owners, it's the billboard companies. Yeah. Those are the ones that on a daily basis, probably this last weekend, there were many trees that were illegally pruned, and we've tried to work with them over many years to no avail.
Okay, thank you. Questions, comments? None? Seeing no other questions or comments,
how many people do you have that can do this? How many inspectors would be upgraded to this?
In the Investigation Enforcement Division, we currently have 55 folks who can write the citation, urban forestry.
We have quite a few less. We have about 12, but together we can do quite a bit.
Yeah. So you got 12 that can't, but 55 that can write regular citations on streets.
Right.
You're just giving that authority to that additional 12 that
Correct.
Concentrate on trees. Yeah, good.
Okay, so without any objection, we'll approve this item and send it to full council.
Thank you.
There are no public comment cards, and that adjourns the first meeting of the chairmanship of Jose Weezer of the Public Works Committee.